Good evening. Welcome to the June 13th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. Whether you're here in chambers or watching at home, we're glad you're with us tonight. As is our custom, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosie, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose, Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully,
Here.
Commissioner Davenport.
Here.
Welcome, everyone. Is there a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move to adopt the June 6, 2023 Village Council meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 4 on our agenda is public comments. This is the portion of the meeting where we take public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. So if you have an item of general nature or comment you'd like to make, please come on down to the podium.
I'm not sure. I didn't look all the way through the agenda yet.
Come on down, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Good evening. Not such a nice Tuesday night this time. But we need it right.
We need it right.
I know you're beginning to work on long-range planning, and I would just like to say that along with, yay stop signs, still on that, I would like affordable housing to be part of the discussions. And that just means housing that maybe seniors who are downsizing would, have an option to stay. Young families that are moving here would have an option to get their lives started and established here. I know in our area, adults with intellectual disabilities are living much longer than they used to, and their parents are panicking about where their kids can live. So there's all kinds of people that would benefit from thinking about making Downers Grove a place that has a variety of housing options available and isn't just a place for 5 and 6 bedroom mansions. I'd love to see a diversity of housing stock. In terms of long-range planning, we've got land to sell, there's going to be development coming, and I think I'd be grateful if that's part of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, we will continue with the consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2 passes unanimously. Just like that, we're on to item 6, our active agenda. This is the portion of the meeting where we plan to take action on items previously discussed. These items have been discussed at least once before, sometimes many times before. Is there a motion concerning a special use permit?
Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance authorizing the extension of a special use permit to permit a personal vehicle sales business at 2424 Ogden Avenue to January 6th, 2024, as presented.
Second.
Any audience questions or comments on this item? Council comments or questions? Okay, I'll just mention for those at home, special uses, if not begun in terms of operation, have an expiration date. In this case, the construction is taking a little longer than people were planning, so we're extending that special use. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning Chapter 14?
Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 14 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code as presented.
Second.
Any audience comments or questions? Any council comments or questions? This one is a little bit of a housekeeping exercise. It's essentially putting into ordinance several parking and traffic adjustments that have been made over the last year. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2 is unanimous. Is there an ordinance concerning video gaming?
Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance amending Section 3.331 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code concerning video gaming at fraternal and veteran organizations as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the audience? Comments or questions from the council? Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't say anything last time when this came up as a workshop item, but there's been a little bit of confusion out there, so I just thought I'd add some comments to put it in context. There's been a change in state law that allows for video gaming at fraternal and veteran organizations, which in Downers Grove means the Moose, the VFW, and the American Legion, for example. State law is giving them that right, regardless of what the municipality says, but we have something called a liquor ordinance, which says basically you can't have gambling and liquor sales at the same place, but if state law is allowing these organizations to engage in video gambling as of right as citizens of the state of Illinois, it would be odd for us to say, well, you can't do, even though the state law gives you that right, we're not going to let you do it because we'll take away your liquor privileges, which puts them in a real conundrum. So this motion, which didn't get a lot of discussion last week because of the reason I just mentioned, would allow those three and other organizations within Downers Grove, which are permitted by state law to have video gaming, to also have a liquor license, basically to continue conducting themselves the way they have been for a long, long time, but with that additional benefit that the state grants them. So there's been some confusion, so well, why are we letting these people do it and not others? It's largely because of the state. However, this council has discussed the topic of video gaming in the past, and frankly, it's been left unresolved. This may provide an opportunity to actually see how it operates within our community and provide some information and guidance for us to consider what I hope is a revisitation of that issue, particularly given this development. So that's all I wanted to throw out there, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Others? Just to add, I think there was also within the state ordinance, there was a requirement that the licensee not be in conflict with any local ordinances. And so this, to Martin's point, helps clean up and align our rules with the state's rules. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That too passes unanimously. Just like that, we're on to our first reading portion of our meeting. This is the portion of the meeting where we take up items, discuss items on which we do not plan to take formal action tonight. These may be items that have been talked about previously or tonight for the first time. But again, these are items on which we do not plan to take action this evening. Manager Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. 3 items on tonight's first reading agenda, 2 topics. The first concerns the Meadowbrook Shopping Center. This agenda item concerns actually the revitalization of the Meadowbrook Shopping Center. The requested council actions here tonight are to direct staff to take steps to create a tax increment financing district for this shopping center, negotiate a redevelopment agreement in accordance with key terms that were presented in the staff report we'll go over tonight, and adopt an inducement resolution. Meadowbrook Shopping Center is located at the southwest corner of 63rd and Woodward, and it's currently improved with inline buildings totaling about 189,000 square feet of tenant space. It also has 1 vacant, dilapidated outlot building. And the property was recently purchased by Stelco Properties from Naperville. Our comprehensive plan identifies this shopping center as a catalyst site and goes on to say it's potentially the largest development opportunity on 63rd Street. Additionally, our comprehensive plan recommends exploring a tax increment financing district to facilitate redevelopment of this property. The owner of the property is proposing to revitalize the center with assistance from the village. The revitalization project would result in a 15,000 square foot grocery store or retail store in the inline buildings, 3 new outlots with a minimum of 8,400 square feet of those spaces leased to sales tax producing tenants, the reconstruction of the parking lot, including installation of landscaping areas throughout, and new facades on all 4 sides of the existing inline buildings. And here are some of the renderings of what that might look like as we go forward. Village assistance is required to facilitate the revitalization, including a tax increment financing district, a redevelopment agreement, and an inducement resolution. The first step is to create a tax increment financing district, which would include only the Meadowbrook Shopping Center. This would allow the additional property taxes generated by the improvements to be reinvested back into this project and help pay for some of the costs of the project itself. And when completed, the project is expected to generate approximately $150,000 per year in additional sales tax revenue and about $50,000 a year in additional food and beverage tax revenue. The village would enter into a redevelopment agreement with the owner, and that agreement would require the owner to make the improvements that were discussed and presented here tonight and adhere to a specific development schedule. The key terms of the agreement are included in detail in the agenda materials that are online and presented here with the council materials tonight. And the revitalization of this center is projected to generate nearly $14 million in incremental property taxes over the life of a 23-year TIF district. The current value of that income stream calculates to just over $5 million. And the village would issue up to 4 developer notes totaling $5 million worth of TIF assistance. And that assistance would function basically as a rebate of the incremental property taxes, with the notes issued upon successful completion of each of 4 project phases. The village would not be obligated to provide any financial assistance from any other financial resources. The next action would be the approval of an inducement resolution. The developer will be incurring TIF-eligible expenses, including the preparation of tax increment financing reports, preparing architectural and engineering plans, and other related costs during the time between now and when the TIF district is actually created. Adoption of this resolution would actually allow the developer to be reimbursed for those qualifying expenses with revenues that are forthcoming from the TIF district itself. We are very excited not only to present this project, but to introduce to the council Tony Stella from Stoco Properties, who has recently purchased the property, has been working with staff to bring this project to this point. So if Mr. Stella would like, we could invite him to the podium just to say a few words.
Hi, how are you? I would like to thank the village for their time and the staff and all the time that we've spent to get the project to this point. I'm very optimistic, excited that when we're finished with the project, the village, the community, the neighbors in that immediate area are going to be more than thrilled with the changes that we intend to make, including bringing some high-quality tenants to the project. So, I think it's long overdue, and I think it's going to be a big impact on that area.
And with that, Mayor and Council, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Tony. Thanks for being here tonight as well. Any comments or questions from the council on this item? Martin?
Thanks, Mayor. 2 things. One, really glad to see this. Long overdue is an understatement, but not for lack of trying. This council, prior councils, and staff for many, many years, working with EDC and others, has really tried to elevate this property. It's been a catalyst site for a long time, and I'm really glad to see this come forward. And the other thing I wanted to say is I appreciate the structure of the agreement, because it provides a lot of value in a phased fashion such that the risk to the village is, I would say, minimal, certainly manageable. And that's a very wise structure, so I appreciate the way that was put together. That's it.
Thank you, Martin. Leslie?
I also am thrilled to see this happen. I, live on the south side of town, so I am very excited that, driving by that now we'll have a little bit of revitalization. So very happy to see this move forward. One comment that we actually did get from residents, and it is something that I would be interested in, is someone suggested if it would be possible to put in any sort of EV charging infrastructure, or anything with regard to sustainability, or potentially using some renewables or green spaces. So while not a requirement in some of this, especially given how eager we are to move forward, I would love to see if there's anything that we could come up with to kind of be a little greener. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I
Mike?
had a few questions, but staff answered them, and I'm good. So,
Okay.
I guess one thing I'll highlight is that this proposal includes some facade improvements to the rear of these buildings as well, which, if you've ever been back there, it's in need. So I very much appreciate that, because I actually run through there every now and then. I'm out and about in town. So that's it.
Anyone else? I have a few questions, and they don't necessarily need to be answered this evening, so I'll just lay them out there. One of the things that jumped out at me I'm looking now at the site plan that's in our packet of information, so a slightly more detailed one that's available on the website. And at least the current Google Maps version, which pretty much comports to what I've seen driving through there. I'd like to see some effort at additional green space. So there were some questions in the questions to council, from council questions about whether or not there are enough parking spaces, and one of the answers was it's seldom full. That is not necessarily an indication of the quality of the tenants. Most of our malls are seldom full. If we look at some of the ones that are busier, like for instance on Ogden Avenue, the rows out by Ogden are often not full. And that, to me, seems like an opportunity to try and improve the volume of green space on the site. The current parking islands that are there look to be, at least to me, to be pretty much the same ones that are there.
If we could, Mayor, I think that issue is already addressed and included in the draft term sheet that the
Oh, is
council
it?
will be
Okay.
approving. So this concept plan does not reflect the changes that are required in that
Okay.
term. There'd be significant enhancements in the amount of space itself, and we'd work with the developer to put it in the right place so that parking still functions properly, and yet there's a significant increase in green space in the parking lot.
That's awesome, and that may be the case with some of these other comments, so I'll just work through these quickly and not expect we get into them tonight, but
Okay.
they'll be out there on the table, and maybe revised plans will reflect them.
Mayor,
Mike?
may I make a
Yeah.
comment?
Sure.
Just kind of piggybacking on what you're talking about, I think in the past, I think this is a conversation we want to have again going forward. In the past, we've prioritized parking, right? And having it right out in front of everyone so they can see it. And it's kind of an old way of thinking, and I think having a little more greenery makes some sense, especially with our concern about stormwater management in town and environmental concerns as well. It's just a matter of what you're going to prioritize, right? So going forward, I think this is, this may help to spur on some more conversation about our parking ratios. So,
Dave, I'll write these up and get them to you, and Tony, this is not intended to be, sound like I'm jumping you here tonight, information I may not have that likely may be forthcoming. In the agreement, though, specific to the agreement, one of the things I was thinking of is when we do, it is true of public trees that we plant in parkways, it's true of any trees, they're not all going to make it, right? And so it seems like if that's important to us, if the landscaping and the green space improvements are important to us, we may want to try and include in the agreement some guarantees that the trees are actually replaced when they croak, because some of them will.
good point.
That, Mike, you mentioned running through that back alley, and I've driven through that back alley, which is probably not something I should be doing. But I wonder if there's any consideration, or we might wonder about whether or not closing that one entrance at Hastings Avenue makes sense. We mentioned neighbors, Tony mentioned neighbors, and the idea of a node that serves the neighborhood, so the amount of ability this has to be friendly to pedestrians is enhanced by the less traffic there is. That spot, I know people love to have access, but it's not any different than the rest of the site at that point in terms of having to drive along the building to get there. I was also wondering about how we're going to manage refuse on that building D. I see it called out real clearly on the other buildings, so maybe on the new site plans it'll be on there, but that's a thing for me, cleaning up those refuse management stables, whatever you want to call them, dumpster enclosures, can really make a big difference in how a site feels to the general public. And then back on the pedestrian subject, there's a real clear, at least on this version of the drawings I'm looking at, tied to the Woodward Avenue sidewalk at Building C. I'm wondering if there's any other ties, like at Building D, or to get from C to D, or to get from C to B. There's a comment up at the top about revised entry boulevard, including pedestrian access to main line. or main inline rather, and I guess I'm assuming that means there's a sidewalk straight down from 63rd to the inline, but I'd love something like that to be clearly identified. We had some conversations a little bit like this on some of the outlots at 75th Street. And I guess that's probably enough for now. I'll write these down and send them to you. I didn't know there was a new set of drawings.
Right, saw a lot of council members' heads nodding, so those are things that absolutely can be put in, not only concept plans, but when they come through for the zoning, we'll make sure we get that at the detail level, Mayor.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, probably anybody from the audience have any comments or questions? Come on down, please.
This may be somewhere that I just haven't seen, but, because I can't really see that from this far. How many retail entities could fit in those 4 buildings? One big grocery store, and are we looking at 10 retailers or 3 more? Or?
There is room for a national grocery store. We are in serious discussions with one.
Yeah.
And then there's a variety of other spaces. Depending if we were to combine spaces or lease individually, I think there's probably room for 10 or 12 individual tenants. My guess is some of those would be combined, so it would be some larger tenants.
So you could have 2 small ones and then a double one that would be one that would have a bigger.
There are spaces that are contiguous.
Yeah.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I just hope there are 10 retailers that are still, I just hope there are 10 retailers that are still in business that want to come to a shopping mall. When I look at Yorktown and they're building housing there. I mean, this needs to be done, something needs to be done, but I just hope people are shopping at strip malls still by the time this gets done. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on. Dave?
Just to wrap that one up, for those who may not have been able to hear that, grocery tenant, 10 to 12 additional tenants with some flexibility in design was the answer to that question. And with that, I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is consideration of a motion directing staff to publish a request for proposals for the redevelopment of Lot 2 right here on this Civic Center project in this parcel. As everyone here in this room knows, the village is currently redeveloping the Civic Center property located south of the railroad tracks and east of Washington with a new 80,000 square foot building that will serve as our new police station, our village hall, and School District 58 administration offices. The entire property is over 8.4 acres in area and consists of 3 lots. And when we put together our facilities and replacement plan, it called for lots 1 and 3 to continue to be owned by the village, but lot 2 in the middle, shown in yellow, is intended to be sold to a private owner and redeveloped, subject to a redevelopment agreement. According to the plan, revenue from the sale and redevelopment of lot 2 is planned to be used to help pay for the annual debt service payments on the bonds that we issued for the construction of our Civic Center building. So here's a close-up of lot 2. It's about 1.3 acre parcel. Planned to be redeveloped with a multi-family residential building similar to Burlington Station, which is right there at Forest and the railroad tracks on the south side. The facilities plan that was prepared a couple years ago anticipates a 5 to 6 story building with 85 to 100 apartment units with on-site parking, and that parking is likely to be on the first floor or underground of the building. The financing portion of the facilities plan shows that the development would generate over $9 million, over $2.5 million from the sale of the property, and over $6.6 million from property taxes paid into the Civic Center Tax Increment Financing Fund over the life of that TIF district, which would expire in 2045, and that's just shy of $300,000 a year on average. So the village will use a competitive request for a proposal process to select the purchaser and developer of the property and the development itself. The village council will determine which of the proposer and proposals best meets the needs of the village here on this project. So for the goals that were previously identified, there were 3: maximize the revenue from the property, make sure that any redevelopment project is compatible with this neighborhood, both on our site and near us and around us here, And we want to make sure that the selection process itself is predictable and reliable for all parties involved. The key components of the draft RFP, just two things we're highlighting here tonight. The land use itself, multifamily or single-family attached residential development. And the second one is, of course, an exemplary architectural design that is compatible with our Civic Center project and the surrounding neighborhood. As far as the selection criteria that the council may be applying when we make a selection here, the extent to which the project achieves the goals that are on the screen, the financial wherewithal of the developer that's making the proposal, and the proven ability to complete a project not only as described, but according to a schedule that this council will set. And speaking of that schedule, we hope to be out on the street with the request for proposal by early fall, with proposals due back 30 days later, give or take, maybe a little bit more. Really getting in front of this council to select the developer and the development in January of '24, and then approve the key terms of a redevelopment agreement, just like we were talking about on the Meadowbrook property. Doing that in the early spring, around March. Ultimately approving the zoning and the redevelopment agreement in August. That would allow us to hand over the Lot 2 site to the private sector developer as soon as we have cleared the site and moved into our new building and constructed all the parking lots, et cetera. That's in October of '24, and then, as you know, it takes a little bit of time to complete a development of this size. So we're looking at summer of 2026 for the completion of this project. So we're asking the council to direct staff to publish the request for proposal, and we look forward to the council direction on not only the land use, but any other key components that the council would like to see in this RFP. With that, we're happy to answer any questions the council may have there.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments or questions from council? Leslie?
I don't have any questions per se, but I do have some comments. One piece that I would really love to see as part of the sale of this lot is either affordable or inclusionary housing potential, and whether that be 10%, 20%, whatever the case may be, to think about what is considered to be affordable. You're talking about your total housing costs, which includes utilities, to be under 30%. The two groups of folks who are hit the most by that are young adults and seniors. So approximately, almost 60% of young adults under 24 and seniors over 65 are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And that makes it pretty difficult to establish a home here in Downers Grove. So it's challenging for young professionals and young families to get a foothold here. And it's challenging for those who want to downsize and stay here on a fixed income. I am fully aware that there are concerns that this could potentially decrease the revenue that we would get from a developer. I personally am willing to take that risk, but I think there are other things that we could leverage and use to our advantage, like potentially offering variances, whether it be on setbacks, parking requirements, knowing that some of these audiences that we might be targeting might not need as much parking, potentially even seeing if we could move the permitting along a little bit faster. There are different incentives that I think that we could use to try to maximize the profit that we have while still kind of doing the right thing by our community members who are kind of struggling to make ends meet from month to month. So to just kind of think about some of those numbers based on median salaries in DuPage County and that 30% rule. A family of four should be spending about $1,500, $1,563 a month, and that is utilities inclusive. And I looked on rent.com, and as of today, the average rent for a two-bedroom apartment, so remember, two-bedroom for four people, is about $1,845 a month, and on Zillow, it's $1,995 a month. So we are, especially post-COVID, really seeing those rents rise, and we're not seeing a reflection in incomes. So I think it's something that we should consider. I know that there's another group that was referenced by our speaker. I've talked to a few folks at Naperville, and they've done some affordable housing and partnered with some groups for seniors as well as adults with intellectual disabilities. Again, can be incredibly difficult to find affordable units, and this is right on the train, so it would be real easy access to those jobs if they're on the train. So these are things that I think we should consider and at least put as a possibility into the RFP. Yeah, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Chris?
Yeah, I would second Commissioner Sadowski Fugit's asks. I think that's an important thing we should be looking at, especially given, as you mentioned, where we are now and some of the rental rates. I guess I would also be interested to understand the experience that those were responding to the RFP would have in that type of housing. I would also think it would be important if we understood those who have experience building near village facilities or public facilities as well, and anything that we might gain, given that we just dug a big hole and building a building next door, what sort of efficiencies we might learn or have gain from that. Anything we can share, I suppose, as the current developer could share, that might go a long way with that. But I think all of those things would be important to me. And then as obviously we get closer to design and things like that, I'm sure I'll have lots more to add. But yeah, I think we need to look at this as a unique opportunity as a village-owned property to provide, I think it provides us an opportunity to give to many of our residents opportunity that may not have finding in the private market as well. I know it will be a private building, but I think given that it's our land, we should have some say in what goes there. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. I fully appreciate the concerns expressed by my fellow commissioners about making sure that we have diverse housing stock and affordable housing in Downers Grove that's consistent with our community, as our community is. And it's an issue that we have talked about as a council for many years, and our housing stock has changed. We've got new developments in town that didn't exist 10 years ago. We have 5-bedroom homes. We've also built Station Crossing, Acadia on the Green, Burlington Station, just to give an example. So there's a lot of experience with building multifamily units in the downtown, and in most cases, the driving force was to maximize value for those developments because we were in a TIF district. And the whole function of a TIF district is to maximize value because that's how you get the most benefit from that TIF arrangement. That's been a driving force for just about every village-owned property that I can recall that we worked on. So I am in favor of looking at other more comprehensive ways of perhaps addressing our housing stock in Downers Grove and looking at affordable housing. I'm not sure that 10% of 8-5 units is going to do much here. I would rather look at or have a discussion and support a discussion about other things that we could do in terms of zoning issues and whatnot that might support on a more broader comprehensive basis addressing that issue throughout the community. But my concern here, and Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit raised it a little bit, is this Village Hall Police Station project has been around for decades. And in every iteration that it has been promoted to the community, whether it was here or on Ogden Avenue or any of its locations, was that the village would maximize the value from the sale of its property in order to minimize the cost of the project to the voters, to the residents, in order to minimize the potential property tax implications of this project. And my concern is that not doing anything that would jeopardize the best and highest use of this particular parcel would be going back on a promise that this council and other councils have made to the community about how this land would be used. I would certainly view it that way, and I'm not trying to speak for others, but I think it's always been presented to the community, and some folks up here may remember when the community was rather up in arms about this project once upon a time. So they have been paying attention to how this project proceeds, and I would personally find it going back on our word to do anything other than maximizing the value from the sale of this property, obviously within our zoning ordinances and within our aesthetic requirements and other things that have already been built into this RFP. So what I'm saying is that I hear and fully appreciate what has been a decades-long conversation about affordable housing and maintaining a diverse housing stock in Downers Grove. And I think there's other things that we have done throughout the community over the years to support senior living facilities, to support other facilities. and I'm all in favor of having those conversations on a more village-wide basis. But this particular project, I would have a problem with doing anything that would jeopardize maximizing the value, because that's kind of the way the project was sold, at least in my opinion, from day one. That's my concern here. So what I'll say is, here, no, but I hear both of you and would welcome that conversation on a more broad-based, comprehensive way to see where that, number one, we're not going to do this here tonight, but would like to know more about our particular housing stock, because candidly, I haven't looked at it in 5 years. Obviously, things have changed. I appreciate the statistics that were provided in terms of the metropolitan area, but obviously, I'm more selfishly concerned about Downers Grove. But if there's things that we can do and whatnot, then I would be welcoming that conversation with the council. But again, with respect to this parcel, that's just sort of the way it's been sold, at least in my opinion. So I just share that, and that's why in this context I would disagree, but in a broader context I would welcome the conversation.
Others? Additional comments?
No comments yet.
No comments yet? My comments are going to sound a lot like Martin's. First and foremost, anything we would do that would diminish or have the potential to diminish the value of this, either as an assessed valuation or as a property sale, is an additional burden on taxpayers for the rest of the village. So what we would be saying is we were willing to, and I think Leslie was clear, willing to take that risk. But it's not sort of like just we providing an opportunity. It's the entire community taking on a 23-year burden and obligation to provide that opportunity. The other thing that I guess I struggle with is this subject has been kicked around for as long as I can remember being in Downers Grove. There was an ad hoc committee on it at one point. There are state statistics on it. The data is always a question, and it always depends on who's looking at it and who wants to say what with it. The truth of the matter is there is a housing shortage across the entire United States at every level of housing, which makes every level of housing more expensive. The truth also is, right this very second, there are 1563 is the magic number. There are 3 2-bedrooms available for $1,600 right now in Downers Grove. There's one more coming on the market in 2 months. I don't think that's the important number. I think the point is the housing stock across the entire community is in fact very broad and very diverse. The big issue is that there isn't enough of it. If we were to put 8 units or 10 units into this building that were whatever we determined the number should be, there would instantly be an affordable housing crisis in Downers Grove as defined by the statistics of percentage of income and average income. I think it's a borderline meaningless attempt at adjusting a market that is 20,000 units strong and frankly very, very diverse right now. You know, when we look at that data, if we have an average number, we know we got a lot above and a lot below it. So it's a problem, but I'm not sure it's an affordable housing problem as much as it is a availability problem. And I don't think that we solve or even make a meaningful commentary on or dent in accessibility by having a half a dozen units available at some reduced rate. And the offset of that is likely that all the rest of the taxpayers in Downers Grove pick up a tab for a long period of time. So I'm not interested in including affordable housing, inclusionary housing as part of our proposal or RFP that goes out there. 1 vote of 7, obviously, and there'll be more discussion about this to come. But that's my perspective on it. On a little broader, I know Martin talked about a little broader discussion. If we wanted to have another broad discussion on it, I would certainly welcome one. It would look in my mind a lot like the last one we had, where we got a lot more people involved and a lot more data involved than any one of us just doing a little bit of Google time. So that's where I would go with it. And we'll talk more. Anybody else up here? Anyone from the audience? Laura, you want to talk again? Thank you. Thank you. All right, I think that's it for tonight.
And that'll conclude our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Any additional report, Dave?
No, sir.
I do not have a report this evening. Item 10, council member reports. It's an opportunity for council members to weigh in on goings-on in the community, other entities that they're working with or events that they know about and would like to discuss. Mike, we'll start with you.
8 days. 8 days to Grow Fest. Don't miss it.
Did I do that right? I started with
You
Mark
did,
last time.
thank you.
All right. We got to make sure we balance that.
That's all I have tonight.
Thanks, Mike. Danny?
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
Leslie?
Even though I couldn't make it, just thanks to everybody who came out for the Pride in the Parking Lot. It was a wonderful event. I was unfortunately out of town for a family obligation, but it looked like it was a great time. I also want to wish everyone a meaningful Juneteenth this upcoming Monday. It's short for June 19th, which marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that enslaved people were freed, which was a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Many credit that as the end of slavery, but really it is Juneteenth that honors the end of slavery. So it doesn't make our country weak to acknowledge our past with slavery or take rights away from anyone to discuss the generations of wealth that were denied Black Americans whose families endured not only the dehumanization of slavery, but also Jim Crow laws, redlining, enacting sundown town policies, and other criminal justice policies aimed to keep Black Americans disproportionately in poverty. And it doesn't matter if you or I do or do not have ancestors who participated directly. We still all benefit from a society which some of us have had a head start when we're born, and we should all be consistently working towards a better America. We'll never be a perfect nation, as it's made up of we flawed humans as any other nation, but we should constantly strive to do better, which really is one of the reasons why I'm advocating for inclusionary housing principles, whether it be here or in the future. I would love to have that conversation going forward. It is true that Black households are about 1.5 times more likely to live in places where they're exposed to environmental hazards like poor air quality. And not to mention, according to a recent RAND report, which I'd be happy to share with folks, the median Black household in America has around $24,000 in savings, investments, home equity, and other elements of wealth, whereas the median white household has around $189,000, which is a disparity that continues to worsen over recent decades. And even if we eliminated that wealth gap, we would still need to address the conditions that fed that growth, which are credit, housing, and employment discrimination, and steep disparities in incarceration rates. So to me, that's where we local leaders can come in. We can take small steps to address those deep drivers of inequity so that future generations don't find themselves right back where we are now. Localities that take an active role in shaping affordable housing initiatives have a strong impact on promoting housing stability, achieving equitable development patterns, and building coalitions to foster broader change. It's one of the things we can do as elected municipal officials to help close that gap. So on this Juneteenth, let us honor a moment in our history that was long overdue. Let us get uncomfortable and explore biases and how we white Americans have had a leg up on since this country's inception. Let us advocate for more equitable ordinances and policies, both locally and federally. And at a minimum, let us each choose at least one thing, whether we read a book, take an online course, watch a documentary, join a civil rights organization, or any other activity to actively engage ourselves in that discomfort, to take us one step closer to truly achieving freedom and equality for all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. There was an old tradition with the predecessor to Grow Festival, which was called Heritage Fest, some of you might recall. And there was a certain commissioner that used to say, well, I'm going to promise good weather for Heritage Festival, and miraculously, for 8 years, that happened. Age and wisdom has taught me not to repeat that, but let's just hope. Let's just hope for really good weather for the Rotary Grow Fest. Maybe something north of 50 degrees and hopefully no rain. And the only other thing I'll just say, Mayor, is I just want to wish my colleagues on the council as well as throughout the community a very happy and healthy and joyous Father's Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody wants to keep going?
Nope.
We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.